There we go. Welcome to week 6. This is Augustine's Confessions, book 3 of the Confessions. Augustine of Hippo was born in a small town in present-day Tunisia in 354 CE. That's the Common Era, or 354 years after the birth of Jesus. At this time, Carthage was a large Roman outpost which had been fought over 3 times in what were called the Punic Wars. Punic is the Greek equivalent for the word Phoenicia, the original peoples of Carthage. Carthage had been under the control of Rome for 100 years, and the Roman Empire had expanded to its limits, and in less than 50 years after Augustine's birth would be overrun by the Visigoths from northern Europe in approximately 410. Augustine grew up in a typical fashion then of the middle-class youth of his day, attending a grammar school, and with the help of a rich friend of the family, was allowed to attend university at a nearby city. Augustine's education and his intellectual abilities made it possible, perhaps inevitable, that he would be drawn to the metropolis of Carthage, where he began to teach, and was inspired by his knowledge of the classical writers, Virgil and Cicero. Virgil of the Aeneid, and Cicero, the famous Roman orator and poet. It was a lost book of Cicero's, the Hortensius, that particularly inspired Augustine to pursue the study of philosophy. It was also at this time in his life, about the age of 22, that he joined the popular cult of the Manichees, who believed that the world was a kind of battleground between the cosmic forces of good and evil. These spirits were mainly responsible for men's behavior. Of course, the Manichees believed that they were on the side of good, and they would be rewarded for their allegiance by eternal happiness in their life after death. This philosophy suited Augustine well. The occasions where he gave in to the pleasures of the big city could be blamed on evil spirits instead of his own nature or choices. But ultimately, Augustine's desire for knowledge led him to reject the claims of the Manichees. The main force of his conversion came when at the age of 30 he moved to Rome with his mother Monica, his mistress from Carthage, and became a university professor of rhetoric at Milan, then the most influential academic outpost in the empire. It was in Milan, however, that Augustine came under the influence of Ambrose, the bishop. It was Ambrose who convinced the young man that his philosophical differences with Christianity could be resolved were he to seriously study the sacred scriptures. The dialogues that were conducted by Ambrose and Augustine formed the basis for much of Augustine's future writing and would be referred to in the Confessions. However, oftentimes at the end of a long dispute over some arcane point of theology or philosophy, it was Monica, Augustine's mother, who was able to point to some scripture and relate a solution mostly simple and practical, grounded in the realities of their own lives. In 387, Augustine was baptized and shortly returned to Africa, where he would have gladly led a quiet and scholarly existence, but his skills and talents were widely recognized and needed by the communities within which he lived, and so he became bishop of Hippo, where he lived for another 40 years until his death at the age of 76. His major works include the Confessions, the City of God, sermons, the catechetical instructions, and a number of other writings and personal reflections. Augustine's thoughtful, philosophical, and personal reflections on the nature of the church and religion of Christianity influenced every writer and thinker from the Middle Ages to Aquinas to the Enlightenment thinkers and even to today. His central tenet seems to be that every human had the power to know and love God and to be loved by God, that the world itself is evidence of God's creation, and as such is capable of instructing mankind as to God's nature. However, this naturalistic view of the world is contrasted by Augustine's view of the role of Scripture, which reveals a spiritual reality of mankind as a fallen creature from grace and divinity, and therefore in need of God's saving grace for salvation. So throughout his writing, one is able to hear the tension by which reason and faith are held up for inspection by the power of rhetoric, alternating between appeals to character, to logic, or reason, and finally to emotion. There are 3 main aspects of our excerpt from Book 3 of the Confessions I'd like for you to be familiar with. First, the treatment that Augustine makes of his experience with the philosophical and popular literature of the time. Secondly, his understanding of the role of Scripture in right understanding. and finally the section on the dream of Monica. I look forward to reading and discussing with you in class this remarkable figure in history. Thanks.